السلام عليكم. لا تنسوا الاعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد إن شاء الله.
واحد يعرف مثلا اللي قاله بن غوريون، ده دي المفروض في كل نشره اخبار اجيب كده بن غوريون قال يا جماعه وهو اول رئيس وزراء لاسرائيل قوتنا ليست في سلاحنا النووي، قوتنا في تفتيت ثلاث دول كبيره حوالين وبالترتيب العراق سوريا مصر الى دويلات متناحره على اسس دينيه وطائفيه، ونجاحنا في هذا الامر لا يعتمد على ذكائنا بقدر ما يعتمد على جهل وغباء الطرف الاخر يوم كتبها. عندي من العيال اللي طالعه دي اللي مش فاهم حاجه لا عن تاريخ ولا الكلام ده كله. احكي لنا اللي بيعملوا ده، احكي لهم ازاي ان بلد زي امريكا لعبه في ايدين الصهاينيه العالميه. اكتب لهم وعرفهم ليل ونهار في مدارسهم وفي كتبهم وكرارسهم اللي قاله هربرت سبنسر عضو الكونجرس المسيحي لما طلع يقول جمله حق وقال يا جماعه ان اليهود في بلادنا يسيطرون على كل ما يسيطر على المعده والعقل والغرائز، ولم يعد باقيا لدينا في هذا البلد الا ان نغير اسم نيويورك الى جويورك. وفعلا نيويورك 8 مليون 5 مليون يهودي فيها. الهاي كورت في امريكا 7 يهود منها بنيامين فرانكلين 80 سنه فاتت لما لقى اليهود بيدخلوا اولادهم في الجهاز المحاميين والى اخره قال خراب امريكا سوف يكون على ايدينا.
You know, the attack by Hamas, the military attack, and let's call it what it is. It was the most professionally executed large-scale raid carried out by a light infantry force in modern history. Now, the Israelis will say it was an act of terrorism. No, it was a military assault against legitimate military targets. What about the 1,400 dead? Well, most of them were soldiers. And of the civilians, estimated 80% of those civilians were killed by the Israelis themselves. We now know that the Apache helicopters fired indiscriminately against the people trying to flee for their lives from the crossfire that had ensued between Hamas fighters and Israeli security forces, that the Apache helicopters couldn't differentiate between them, so they killed everybody. We now know that the Israeli police forces, their special forces hostage rescue team, Yaman, when recapturing Berry, was in communications with hostages who said, we're in this building, they're ready to surrender, and they made the option to fire in with tank runs and kill everybody anyways, that the majority of the people who died the majority of the civilians who died that day were killed by Apache helicopters, Merkava tanks, or Israeli Defense Force, panicked Israeli Defense Force. This was a military assault carried out by Hamas to achieve political objectives. Wars and essential politics by other means. And so it's legitimate for them to do this. And as I just told you, it appears that they're well on their way to achieve all political objectives of this operation. This will go down as one of the greatest victories for the Palestinian cause in the history of the Palestinian cause, because of what Hamas did, there's a real possibility or probability of there being a Palestinian state. On October 6th, there was no possibility of that. Today, it's there. Only because of Hamas.
Josh Paul worked in the bureau within the State Department that's responsible for arms sales. He resigned in recent days over America's support of Israel's response to the October 7th attacks, and he joins me now. Josh, thank you for being here tonight. I was reading your resignation letter. It's quite lengthy, and in it you accuse the U.S. of basically having a blind spot and blind support for Israel, of supporting the occupation and rushing into short-sighted, destructive, and unjust policies. That's what you say in your letter. Can you just kind of walk me through what led to this decision for you to resign?
Yes, I've worked in the Bureau of Political Military Affairs for over 11 years. This is the bureau responsible for arms transfers to partners around the world. I have never seen a circumstance before in which there is a clear risk of civilian casualties resulting from US arms transfers. And in fact, we are seeing that manifesting on the ground with thousands of Palestinian civilian casualties. And yet no questions asked, not even a debate about whether or not we should provide the arms that are being used to commit those, I believe, human rights violations, but certainly to kill those civilians. So faced with the massive scope of the crisis that we are seeing in Gaza, the massive scope of civilian casualties, the fact that I also believe that the policy has not led to peace for Israel or for Palestinians. It has been a dead-end policy. But absent the ability to have even a discussion about that before shipping arms, I felt I had to resign.
Dear diplomats, these past few weeks I've been feeling outraged. The hell of revenge that Israel is letting rain down on the Palestinian people in Gaza after the Hamas atrocities is moving through my screen like an unstoppable train. I was a diplomat once, and I lived in Palestine. And then too, Palestinian people were being dehumanized, displaced and killed by Israel. And my country, the Netherlands, did not do a thing. I did not want to be part of this non-response, so I decided to quit as a diplomat. Well, here we are. So many lives lost. I think about my seniors at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They thought my moral objections were a sign of weakness. They scolded me for calling it apartheid. And they said trying to bring this up with the minister was not part of my role as a civil servant. Young diplomats have been sending me messages these past weeks. What can we do? They ask. What I would like to shout to them is this. Go, run as fast as you can. This rotten system does not deserve your talents. Apparently, diplomats are not expected to build a better world. But on the other hand, if all the good people go, what will remain? An emaciated carcass of old, heartless realpolitik.
When did you start to ask yourself the question of what about Palestine?
Too freaking late. I started asking myself that question too freaking late. I grew up culturally Jewish. My friends, my boyfriends, my life was surrounded by Jewish people. In fact, it was like kind of cool to be Jewish when I grew up. I didn't even really know the concept of Zionism because Zionism was just Judaism, right? The idea that Israel should be a place, a safe haven for Jewish people. That just was what it was. The concept of birthright made total sense. I didn't even question it. The fact that the government would subsidize a trip to Israel so that you could see your homeland. That didn't strike me as weird at all. And the Jewish population is pretty small, so there's only a few degrees of separation between you and somebody who lives in Israel. And that just felt like part of the package of being Jewish. I didn't question the fact that after the Holocaust, we would need a safe haven. And yes, 6 million people dying this close in terms of the history of the world is terrifying. And yes, Jewish people are not the most beloved people on the planet, right? Traditionally, we're not. So yeah, it made sense to me. But I didn't think about how many other people have been genocided and that they don't get their own theocratic ethno-state. I didn't know that in order to achieve that, in order to get Israel to be Israel, that Palestinians had to be forcibly removed from their homes. I didn't know that it was an illegal occupation. I didn't know that Israel controlled a huge percentage of Palestinians' water. I didn't know that it was a 75-year occupation. I didn't know that Palestinians had to move through checkpoints in order to get anywhere. I didn't know that 90% of their economy is from handouts that like the world has been giving them resources because they don't have any of their own because of said occupation. I didn't know that there were thousands of Palestinian prisoners in Israel that don't get a trial, hundreds of whom are kids. I didn't know that Israel had one of the strongest militaries in the world and provides military supplies to a lot of the rest of the world. I didn't think about the fact that putting an ally in the middle of the Middle East filled with Jews as a gift from the US and from the British would be a super smart political tactic because none of the rest of the world wanted us anywhere. My first thought after the October 7th attack was what a brutal, horrific thing to happen to the Jewish population and to the Israeli civilians. And I still believe that that is true. However, I didn't have context. And now that over 10,000 Palestinians have died, now that I know that Israel dropped more bombs in 6 days than the US dropped in Afghanistan in an entire year of war, now that I've listened and learned for the past 3 weeks, I wish I had asked what about Palestine sooner.
Hello, this is a public service announcement. As you may have heard, Israel is now in hospitals sniping people to death. Not only that, they have cut off electricity and 2 babies have died in the incubator, as well as 1 man who was on life support. So my message for you today is don't give up. Don't stop talking about Palestine. Don't stop sharing what's happening over there. The Western media is suppressing the truth, but we are the voice of the truth, and we are seeing it every day on social media. We are seeing what's going on, live footage. So don't give up. Don't feel like your voice doesn't matter, because your voice does matter. And if we stand together and we boycott and we keep crying out and we keep protesting, we will fight our fight against this genocide. And that's what we have to keep doing. We have to not give up. We may feel hopeless, we may feel like people aren't listening, but fucking make them listen. Make them listen. Rub their face in it. They have to see it. You can't turn away. It's uncomfortable. That. You know what's uncomfortable? Is getting bombed to death and seeing your whole family die. That's uncomfortable. So don't give up. Just keep fighting the good fight. We gotta do it. We have no choice.
יש פה כדורים, 9 מילימטר. הוא ישראלי. בפנים יש נפצים. זהו, תראה משהו יותר מהר. הוא עובד ציד. צלפים. צלפים, קלאצ'ים. חברים שלכם.
לא, זה נשק מאולתר. מה הם עושים?
السلام عليكم. لا تنسوا الاعجاب بالفيديو والاشتراك في القناة تشجيعا لنا لنستمر بنشر المزيد إن شاء الله.